All right, Lions fans, let's talk. I'm going to do a little rant. This is going to be part three, I believe, and it's about this off season, Lions off season in 2021, and of course we're talking about the whole, I guess, direction of the organization where it's going. If it's considered a retooling, a rebuild, or etc., and or should we be well, as fans, I imagine that the Lions fans are ecstatic. But as viewers, should they be ecstatic about what's going on? Well, I'm going to say no. From my perspective, no. There's nothing to be excited about, and it's like window dressing, or window shopping. Said that way. Should you be excited about window shopping? No. You see something that you don't have. Why should you be excited about it? So what I'm saying by that is that when you can dress it up, to make it look like it's progression, but if you don't finish the deal, okay, it's one thing to picture yourself with the clothes that you see on the display. It's one thing to see yourself in it. Okay, all right, you can imagine that. You can imagine yourself going here with this. You imagine yourself going there with that. And then there's the next deal to actually go and purchase it. Do you have what? Do you have the amount, or do you have that was necessary to purchase that? If you do, you get it. And then the next step after that is to go ahead. You could go ahead and applaud yourself that you bought it, and now you can officially go to the house and do what you're going to do with the what you purchased. So I said the same thing with about the Lions off season. Yeah, you did some sort of house cleaning. You cleaned out some things, but at the same time, you actually didn't, because I think the house cleaning started when Quinn and Patricia got here. What this new regime is doing is just basically not doing anything at all. If they're doing it correctly, they would just continue what's being done, what was done. So what I mean by that, okay, you brought in a new coach, you brought in a new GM, you brought in new assistants, and then you make these so-called trades that is considered never done before. Excuse me. Or the Lions is never on this side of it. They're normally on the opposite side of it. They normally, instead of them taking advantage of the situation, normally they're being taken advantage of. All right, so I get that. So that's something that a fan that's let me say, if that's something that an individual that is assessed with being a fan, so they find that acceptable. Personally for me, no, it's not good enough. The reason is because they have to close out the deal. You still haven't got to the mountaintop. The mountaintop is not winning the Super Bowl. The mountaintop is not even the Super Bowl. For the Lions organization, it's actually the mountaintop is actually to go to the heights of where you've been. And the highest heights that they have been since the Super Bowl era has taken place was the NFC title game. Get there. And then we're talking about if the team is progressing, is moving forward. If you can't get back to that point, how can you say you progress? Uh, the fan will say, well, they're doing something that we never done before. Well, what did they do that they never done before? Have they ever traded a player for a first round pick before? Yeah, they have. Have they traded a first round pick for a player before? Yeah, they have. Have they traded a later round pick to get a player? Yeah, they have. They have done these different things before. I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that the problem with the organization, they never finished the deal. They will get started. They will do the first little stuff here, but then it comes to take that next step, that next leap. They don't take it. The next leap is actually being a little bit more aggressive. I'm not going to piggyback off of what's been done with the 49ers and the Eagles, but be a little aggressive. And that's why I think where the fans get a little antsy, or they start to turn on the Lions, because they find themselves in a position to take the next step of being an elite in terms of an organization, not so much maybe as a contender on the field, but as an elite of an elite. They can take the next step as an organization to do something that they've never done before. It's actually put themselves in a position to always come out on top. I proposed a question before: does the ownership know how to be the best? And I don't think so. And so I say that to go into my next little segment of my little rant, is about atmosphere. The atmosphere with the organization has been complacent. It has been complacent for over 50 years. It's been complacent. It doesn't have to progress. It does not have to be. there's no room for challenge. That's why everybody can stay cushioned in their position for a while. You know, losing is okay, long as you're not costing me money. You know what I mean? And what I mean by costing them money is they putting this franchise into a tank. No, they're not. Is the fans still coming to see them? Yeah, because they would do something in the off season that will get them stirred up again. And for the fandoms of fandism or fandom, that what they would do by that, they would look at that and they say, like, oh, they're changing. But no, they put themselves in a position to change, but they never take the next step. The next step is to change the environment. The environment is, okay, all right, you made a trade. You traded Stafford for Goff and 2 firsts and a third. All right, that's a point in the direction. But close out the deal. What you gonna do with those 2 firsts? Now, because every time the Lions does something, by them standing pat with what they did, and it's a chunk of space in between now and them actually being active with those picks. It's a chunk of space. By that time, this is when the rest of the league leapfrogs the Lions. Okay, say for example, you draft Ndamukong Suh. Then there's a gap in what you're going to do to to build off of him. There's a gap. You don't, so you lose him. There is that they will start. They will make. They don't even start it. They make the attempt to start it. Okay, you traded Stafford for Goff, and you got 2 first rounds and the third. Now now once that deal is done, between that point where the deal was done until you actually can use those picks, there's a gap, and in that gap, the rest of the league leapfrogs the Lions. That's where you find the other teams when the Lions have put themselves in a position to succeed in the future. The team that was behind the Lions is now leapfrog the Lions to be positioned right now because they don't finish the deal. So it becomes one of those things they hope something falls to them, hope something comes to them because they don't know how to be in the front. Their atmosphere is conditioned to be okay, 8-8, mediocrity. It's conditioned to be that. When Bob Quinn got here, which I would say he is the best general manager the Lions has had. He said the statement 9-7 is not good enough. 9-7, 8-8 is equivalent to basically being the same thing, and it shouldn't be the same thing. I mean, it shouldn't be acceptable. What is he saying by that? He's not saying record wise. He's saying the approach as an organization is not good enough. He came from an organization that winning 11 games wasn't enough. So he's coming with that attitude that the whole atmosphere has to change. But people will look at the atmosphere, what they were setting when New England was like, okay, it's isolation. They're trying to tear down everything that was there. But everything that was there was not either 9-7 or 8-8. And we're not talking about players. We talk about how the structure, how the franchise or an organization is ran with a low ceiling. Now you have a new owner that's actually just did some damage control from making a mistake. The mistake was firing Jim Caldwell. Am I a fan of Jim Caldwell's? No, but that was the mistake because you went with something that was unproven. But here's the thing: you went for something that's unproven from a winning organization. So somebody could say, "Well, you're contradicting yourself." Actually, I'm not. I'm not. I wasn't. I said they doing damage control. They should, in my opinion, they should never fired Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia till the end of the year. Why? Because they was putting them in a position to be ahead. So instead of them, let's say for example, instead of them being in the 7th pick, you're up at maybe the top 3 or top 4. What are they doing? They actually reestablishing the culture. What they did was they put the team in. They was putting the team in a position, as far as like that they couldn't lose. Somebody said, "Well, how you can say that when they drafted Okudah in the third overall pick? Drafting Okudah is not a bad deal. No more than drafting Jared Davis in the 10th overall. It's not a bad deal. It doesn't matter as far as like if you have it a team such as the Lions had to be built in structures. Excuse me, it had to be structurally built in layers. Let me say it that way. So you have to get the ones that are going to do the dirty work for you. Then you get the ones that you can replace those that does the dirty work with, which is the next grade up, the ones that are considered the foundation. And then off that foundation, you therefore start building on top of that the structure. And then go up as you make your floors and so forth. You put your accessories on top, and then now you got yourself a organization, a winning, a contending organization. So they where they removed all the dirty work players. They removed all that. That's where you find the first wave of Bob Quinn free agents and stuff like that when he first got in office. Those were the ones that built it. Then the second one is going to be the foundation ones. That's when they went into the offseason. That's when they brought in the Troy Flowers, Trey Flowers, and excuse me, Danny Shelton, and along with the draft picks that he brought in here, that was going to be your foundation. Trey Flowers, Kenny Galladay, I'm trying to Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson. Those are like your foundation. All right. Now they left. Now, of course, somebody could say, "Well, why would you say Kenny Galladay?" At the time when they drafted him, he was where he was. But due to the fact that if you were to look at the atmosphere of the team, it it couldn't evolve. It was going to stay right where it was at because what was necessary to do, the Lions wasn't willing to do it. Which was, say, for example, last year, Miami was calling, Denver was calling for Stafford. At the time, Stafford was no touch. But if you were to make that next move, then Quinn and them could do their job. So while I'm not going back to them, I'm saying that it's the case where if you're going to be a championship team, you got to build your layers. You had the guys that does the players that or the team or whatever. If they're position coaches, it's their first line of defense. Those are the ones that they call pawns in chess, of course. But if you were to, those one that does the dirty work, and then after the dirty work is done, you could lay down your foundation, and that's where you got your first wave. You got your T.J. Hawkinsons, you got your Trey Flowers, you have your Frank Ragnows, and you have your first waves, and then you build off of them with complementary pieces, and then you build off of that. By the time of this year, they would have had a contending team if they was allowed to do what they was doing. Somewhat what the organization is doing now. Here's the thing. The only thing about it is everything's still unproven. What I mean by that, you have an unproven coach. You have an unproven. Well, you could say Dan Campbell's proven coach because he was an interim coach with Miami. But you have an unproven general manager. What I mean by that is not that they're unproven. It's where they're about to establish themselves at. It was with a losing culture that doesn't have a high ceiling or a high requirement for excellence. It's a low ceiling. So it doesn't mean anything. So I say all that to say this, that in my opinion, the Lions haven't done anything. They haven't done anything. People say, well, they haven't done the things what they're doing before. Look at once again, it's window dressing. It's window dressing. If the fan is going to look at it for just as what it looks like on the outside, and they are content with well, no, it's a start of something new. Like, actually, it's not. They have always done stuff like that. That has been the standard to get the crowd back, to get the fans back in their favor. But they never would take the next step. Never take the next step. So I'm not satisfied with that, and that's another reason why, of course, I can go into the whole rant about why I'm not a Lions fan, is because of the fact that, I don't think the ownership, regardless who is in the ownership, they don't really care about the fan, about if they win, if they get a winner for the fan. They don't care about that. That's not a high priority. A high priority for them is basically, can they turn those seats into money? So whatever it takes to do that. Winning with this organization. Winning it doesn't take winning to put people in the seats. That's the problem. Because every time they would dress it up, the fans would come charging in. They're doing something different. Each owner has done something different from the next. So you got three owners since they took over. Since the Force took over the franchise, you got three owners, right? Three owners, and each one has done something different than the next. Does that mean they progress? No. Look at the last two results. Somebody can say, well, you can't say that for the third. I'm not basing upon wins and losses. I'm basing upon of excellence, or is being the very best is the priority or not? Prioritizing. They said, well, they're doing it differently. No, this being cost efficient. Now, don't get me wrong. They're still running it like a business because at the end of the day, it's a business. It's not about if you win or you lose. At the end of the day, it's a business. So that's the point what I'm making. The ownership don't care if they win or they lose. They care about making the money. Okay, any business owner, that's the number one priority, right? They're not if 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 getting the approval of the consumer is the end game, but then of course they're gonna be in it to lose according to how businesses are ran or how I don't want to say how the market dictates or whatever the case may be. But what I'm saying with this, if they take the next step, being aggressive, they do this right here. There's going to be a gap between what they did with the Stafford deal, and by the time there's time to use those picks in the next 2 years, it's going to be a gap. There's a gap. It's the same case when you draft. Okay, you draft Calvin Johnson. What do you do with that? You build with that. You complement it. What did you complement with? The best thing they have of a complementary to Calvin Johnson, I would say maybe it was two, maybe arguably three players. You had Javid Best, but that was short lived. You had Reggie Bush, that was short lived. So that's the running backs to complement Calvin from that perspective. But the receivers to complement him, who did you have your best two? You have Nate Burleson and Golden Tate. Those are your best. That's how you complimented Calvin Johnson. See, this team is not aggressive. And the reason why this team is not aggressive, that's the very reason why free agents don't want to come here, because the atmosphere is content with like this incompletion. The, the fan is excited that a free agent comes here to talk with the ownership. So when they do sign someone, it's subpar, and it's never top tier. It's never the top of the market at the time. In other words, it's not the top of their position at the time. It's maybe the top of the market at the time, but it may not, or top of the position of the time, but they're not the top talent of their position when they bringing that in here. Yeah, because you're going to have to pay them maybe double or triple the money. Because why would you be here when the atmosphere is the residue is a stench of this contentment. Just be content. This is good enough to get the player in here. So they don't. The Lions have no leverage as an organization. They have no leverage for any free agent or a free agent that's topping their position group to sign here. They have no leverage because they get rid of it. Your two leverages that you had was Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh, and they couldn't build off of them. And why? It doesn't make any, because okay, you have a GM that didn't know what he was doing. All right, okay, all right, but then that's based upon an ownership that didn't know what they was doing, because the ownership hired the GM, right? The ownership is saying the order is just don't lose me fans. I mean, not lose me fans. Don't lose no money in the seats. Now, I can't get excited about this because look what goes around the Lions. Every time the Lions do something, they don't continue it. They stop. And I think that's almost it's. You look at the Tigers, for example, the Tigers and the Red Wings. Look at those two as an example. When the Tigers, when the Red Wings were winning, before that the salary cap structure hit, They was going to go get like going to get Hall. They got this player. They was getting was it Hall whatever. And they were getting a whole bunch of players off of ex high caliber type Brett. I think it was Brett Hall. I don't know. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. They would get Cujo. No, before they had Cujo, they had Dominic Hajic, I think, as the goalie. They brought him in. They brought so many different players in from different or other teams, right? Because they wanted to win. Who knows what was Illich's reasons for it, but he wanted to win. So he did what it took until they brought in the salary cap, and situation, and then all that stopped, and but they went to go get all the players that was considered the top, and they brought them here, and they got them a title. So go over to the other team with other Illiches, and go to the Tigers. All right, okay, you brought in Leland and Dabrowski, and they was getting you to a close tier, right? They got you Miggy to build off of. You have Verlander to build off of. You have different other things to build off of, right? And then they didn't stop there. They kept going. So they went ahead and got Cecil Fielder. Even regardless if it worked out or not, you could see they was being aggressive. They was going after it. As like they was going after, like it's not so much it was like this was a every year deal that they would do something like that. No, it was just they struck it and they went after it. They got to the World Series twice, even though they didn't finish the deal, but they got there. So when I'm saying like this with the Lions, what they do, they make a move, such as like when they made the move for the one that stands out for me, you trade a first round pick to the Saints for Pat Swilling, who of course the first round pick ended up being Willie Roth, the left tackle. I think he left or the right tackle, left tackle for the Saints. Pro bowler, all pro type guy, whatever. Anyway, I'm not arguing about the pick and what they trade, but they stopped there. They stopped. So you got Pat Swilling with Chris Spielman, then you stop. What else do you got to go keep building, keep going. And sometimes you could be drafting, and the Lions wasn't that bad, so they wasn't like, at the top of the draft board. So you got to go get free agent. You got to be aggressive. You got to create an environment for players for not high quality. Well, I guess you could say high quality free agents of they are the top of their position group that will want to be here if you create an environment. But if you create an environment, well, let's see what they're talking about. Let's bring them in here. All right, that's enough. And then you let them go. I mean, not let them go as in like you do what it takes to get them. What I'm saying is that I don't believe the Lions know how to set an atmosphere for success other than business in terms of as a winner. I don't think they say that way. I don't think the Lions know how to set up a winner. People say, well, the Forest want to win. Yeah, okay, all right. The fans want them to win. I mean, what's the difference? But to set up the franchise to be a winner, I don't think they understand what that takes. Particularly if there's so many different types of franchises in terms of their atmosphere. Okay, the 49ers, every team that was considered like a dynasty was probably in the bottom cellar at one point at a stint of time. But they was able to, once again, they had the dirty work players, then they went from the dirty work to the foundation, then they start building the structure. So if I were to use one of my favorite team of all time, the 49ers, as a franchise, particularly up under the Bill Walsh era, like the first tier, okay, you have Joe Montana with a can't think of his name, Clark, Greg Clark. I can't think of his first name. I'm drawing a blank. The tight end Clark. You got him. You have Solomon. I think it was Freddie Solomon, and you have that. And you got a whole bunch of other guys there, but you really don't have like foundation pieces, right? But you got your guys that could do your dirty work among those. So you start bringing in the guys. Here come this wave where you got I think Joe Montana was there first, but then you got that wave of Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, Roger Craig, and so forth. And I believe who was that? Was it Frank? Was it Stepnowski? No, the linebacker. Can't think of his name. Romanowski. There it is. Romanowski. And I think Don Griffin was one of the cornerbacks. And of course, you're talking about the offensive line. You're talking about Barton. You have what's his name? Barton. Um, uh, Sapolo. Reggie Sapolo. Um, Barton Sapolo. You have different, and you start building off that. And it was your foundation for like a good 4 to 5 years, and then you built on top of that. Now you go with your John Taylors, your Brent Jones, and then you build off of that, right? Because they complement off your foundation, so the foundation won't have to hold all, whatever. You build off of that. The Lions never do that. They never build off of they never have they get the guys to do the dirty work, but the guys that do the dirty work, they try to keep there as like they are the foundation, but they're not. They are the dirty work. So the fans will say, "Why are you getting rid of those players? They're the best that we got." No, they was your dirty workers. Now it's time to go up the ante because you just set a standard. You just changed the environment. When you got your dirty workers doing the works, now you have something to build off of. The dirty workers did the groundwork. That's what you had. What's what Matt Patricia he did. They cleared him, Bob Quinn. They cleared out the dirty work. All those players that the Lions fans would consider A-type players on the A list, but they actually like B and C type players. And I'm speaking about the Glover Quins. I'm speaking about the Darius Slays. I'm speaking about those are like B listers. They're not starting on other teams. They was actually like reserve on other teams. They got here and got a shot because it was up for grabs. Because based upon what the previous regime was doing, they wasn't the Millen era didn't know what they were doing. Once again, complacency and just they're being comfortable in complacency. Just content. So Bob Quinn had to clean out 2 eras. He had to clean out the Mayhew as well as the Millen. He had to clean out all that mess. And now they have a clean slate to build. Now you have Quinn got you some foundation pieces. I could tell you 4 off the top. Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson, Trey Flowers, and I'm missing one. I'm drawing a blank. Um, hmm, hmm, hmm. I'm drawing a blank with the Lions as a whole. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, it'll come up shortly. But you got those. You build your foundation off of. Those are the guys that they don't do the dirt. They don't. They aren't. They're not the. They don't do the dirty work, such as you would get the players like a Christian Jones or safety that nobody seemed to like when he was here. You can put Jared Davis. You can put those players in there too. Wilson. I can't think of his first name, but Wilson. Those guys did your dirty work, but they're not mainstays. You get rid of them and go to the next step up, right? Because now you got something to build off of. What I mean by build off of, you don't know you don't even know where to start from a losing organization until the dirty work is cleaned out, until the dirty workers does their job. You don't even know what you have unless in the midst of getting the dirty workers or get the guys that's going to do the dirty work, you find you something to build off of. If I were to use the Pistons going to work crew as an example, Joe Dumars had to get a whole bunch of dirty workers. And in the midst of the dirty workers, he found the gem. And that gem was Ben Wallace. But the dirty workers, you had the Chucky Atkins, you had Zeljko Rabacha, you had the John Barrys, the Cliff Robinsons and everything else. And when I can't even say Cliff Robinson. You had who was that other guy? Chucky Atkins, uh, said Chucky Atkins and stuff like that. You had those guys that they was the first line of defense to Corliss Williamson. You had those when they was 50, when they was 32-50. That was up under George Irvine. That first year, those guys did your dirty work. And then in the midst of the dirty work, you found you a Jim and Ben Wallace to build off of. Now, somebody would say, what about Stackhouse during that time? See, Stackhouse, people would say, what about him? Stackhouse was like, he's not a foundation piece, and he's not a dirty worker, so he's expendable. So he's the guy that's going to get you assets back. If he's not a dirty worker, and he's not a foundation piece, that's going to get you, if it has value, you're going to get some in return. So that's when they got them a foundational piece, such as in Rip Hamilton back in return. And then, of course, we know about the trade for Rasheed Wallace, Zellico, I think Chucky Atkins was a part of the deal. I can't think of, I think Lindsey Hunter was part of the deal. It was a 3-team trade, I believe, with Boston and somebody else that got Rasheed. Boston and Atlanta. It was a 3-team trade. And of course, that's how we got Rasheed. There was those dirty workers that they got rid of to get Rasheed Wallace over here. Of course, along with some draft picks. But if you notice, that offseason, they didn't bring back Cliff Robinson. Because Cliff Robinson was like on the same tier as the Stackhouse. He wasn't a foundation piece, and he wasn't a dirty worker anymore. So you got to move on. So, but now you got something to move on. You got a standard to move off of because a template was made. Okay, you need something to complement who? Ben Wallace. So this past year, you saw T.J. Hawkinson bust out. You saw Frank Ragnow bust out, and uh, missing somebody. I don't know why I keep drawing a blank with this team. You got two players that you could, and Trey Flowers. Trey Flowers didn't bust out because he was hurt, but I already know what he's going to do. He's a guy he's gonna play great. He's going to bring his game, but that's just the deal. They doing to him what they did to Sue. Am I saying him and Sue is the same player? No. I'm saying they're doing to him what they want him to carry all the load, but he can, but he shouldn't have to. Sue shouldn't carry all the load. What I mean by that, that's a guy that he's at his very best when you got somebody on the side of him that's taking something off of him. Sue, at the start of his career, it was like somewhat like a Aaron Donald. You put something besides Aaron Donald gonna get you 20 plus sacks, right? But if you put Aaron Donald by himself, he can get you maybe half of that, maybe less than half. So that's what I'm saying. The Lions got to finish the deal. You start off with, okay, all right, you brought in Brockers. Now, is he going to be one of your dirty workers? Is he your foundation? What is he? Because your foundation right now should be Trey Flowers. It's one. Oh, the rest on that the rest on that defensive line, what do you have? As a foundation, you could say what, Romeo Okoro? That's a dirty worker. That's like a Ben Wallace-esque guy, but he's not a foundation guy. But I mean, he's like a Cliff Robinson guy. He's not Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed Wallace was the step higher than Cliff Robinson, even though they basically can do the same thing. But Rasheed Wallace could do it at a higher volume, at the next tier volume. So the Lions need to go ahead and if you have Frank Ragnow, and so you get somebody on the left and to the right of him that will lessen the load at a high level. Okay, I believe they have two. They have two right there in the balance, waiting in the balance, and then you have Jonah Jackson, and then you have Halapaludi Vitae. You can move him to guard, right? Steinberg, whoever the guy that they drafted, I think he's a dirty worker. He's like He's a backup, if you want to call it, case of emergency guy. The standard is the standard at guards should be how Ragnow played it. That was the standard at guard. So you're getting a guy who's going to play at his level at guard or better than that. That's why I believe where how he played at guard is it's like Jonah Jackson could be his his area. And on the other side, you got to do the self same thing. If I'm if they can't move and get some compensation back for Halapalooty Vitae, then that's my guard. Or make him at right tackle, and then I put a bona fide stud right there at guard. Now, okay, now what are we talking about here? Let's go forward with the number with the seventh overall pick. With the seventh overall pick, of course, that the likely desirable thing to do is to trade back. And of course, I was the guy that said, okay, take the 7 overall pick and trade it for a veteran guard. Like my guy was Quentin Nelson. All right. Now, of course, I was when I made that assessment, when I made that choice, I really, really didn't dive into the whole drafting strategy and all that good stuff, right? I didn't dive into it. So I saw a name that was considered whatever, but I didn't take consideration of the atmosphere here. The atmosphere here is not ready for a guy like that. That's why the top tier free agents at their position group don't come here. Because the atmosphere is not ready for them. It will actually hinder them. Somebody say, how can you say that? Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh. Stafford is not in their category. He is not in their tier. He's not in their respective tier. He's not. Stafford has never been a top 5 at his position. Those two have. So, but what I'm saying is they diminish them by not building up, by lessening their load. Even when they brought in complementary players, they still had to play. They still had to carry their complementary player weight as well as their own. Who did you put next to Sue? Okay, you drafted Nick Fairley. Okay, how did that work out? Sammy Hill. I'm drawing a blank with the rest of them. What did you get? Did anyone take the load off of Sue so he could be dominant? No. All right, Calvin Johnson. Who did you get to take the load off of him? You can say Golden Tate. That will probably be the closest you probably would get. But Golden Tate didn't really take off until Calvin Johnson was gone. Golden Tate came in with a chip on his shoulder, like I'm not a number 2 to anybody. I'm a number 1. So all right, then that's where the distribution of the ball got to go around. But anyway, I'm going somewhere else with that. With the number 7 overall pick, I was talking about trading that for a veteran guard, whatever. But then now I'm thinking about it that Quentin Nelson, his talent level, this organization is not ready for that. They're still content with just getting good PR spin. They're not content with winning because they haven't even tasted winning yet. So a fan would say they're doing something new. They're doing what they all have, what they have always done. It's in a different color. And so as long as the color is different, the fan thinks it's different. It's the same thing. They have done it since the Force took over the regime. Matter of fact, forgive me. They have done it since the 91 season. Since reaching that NFC title game, they have done it ever since. Have you noticed they never got back to that? Because they kept doing it the same way. You dress it up on the outside to make it like it's new on the inside, and it never has changed. What Quinn did put them in a proper position right now. People say their tenure was terrible. Their regime was they ran out players that were just really B-list players. If that those players was your found. Darius Slay is not a foundational piece. Ndamukong Suh is the foundation piece. Darius Slay is not a foundation piece. Quandre Diggs is not a foundational piece. Those are guys those are your consider your dirty workers. But here's the deal: since since the atmosphere here is a low ceiling, you have to pay dirty workers foundational piece price money. So that's why Kenny Galladay was a string of the Lions alone, and he ended up going to New York. Why? Because New York has a winning ceiling. They got what they can say. They don't even have to say anything. When you go into the building in New York, you can smell 2 titles. When you come to the Lions organization, what do you smell? You don't even smell NFC title game anymore because it's been that long. It's been over 20 years. You don't smell that anymore. What do you smell? You smell 8, 8, 9, and 7. So when Quinn was talking about we got to get rid of that 9 and 7, 9 and 7 is not good enough, he's talking about that stench is in the air. That means the level of acceptance has to change. Now somebody said, well, he brought in all those players that was they were I don't want to call them subpar players, but they was like B-list players. Nobody wants to come here. So he brought in guys that were considered B-list players, but you had to pay them double because, in fact, of the environment here, it stinks. I'm not talking about the city. I'm talking about just how the organization is ran. It stinks. They had a high tolerance for losing, but a low tolerance for being content as far as with winning. They had a high tolerance for losing. So I'm ranting about it, and yeah, I'm bashing it. What is going on? Because whenever the Lions do something that's one step forward, going forward, they stop. Why? Because now you did enough, right? What they did with the Stafford deal, they did more than enough. They did more. Okay, the restructuring of golf contract, the restructuring of Jamie Collison contract, the getting rid of certain players, that was going to save them money and everything else. They did that. That was more than enough for the fans to come back to the seats. But they didn't do enough to become a winner. Somebody said, how can you say? You only know what they got. You could tell with the dirty workers that you have. And then the level of your dirty workers, are they still here or are they gone? Okay, they got rid of a lot of the dirty workers. Now, what did you replace them with? What did you replace Christian Jones with? What did you replace Wilson, the corner? Whatever. They said the upgrade was Deron Harmon. He's upgrade over that. Okay, so you replaced it. But is he still here? No. All right, so now what you do? So I'm saying they have a plan. Let me correct that. They seem to have a plan, but the problem with what I'm seeing is, or not gonna say the problem. I'm just not going to be overly excited about what I see is being done because they never take that next step. They do right here in this area where they change the front office and everything else. It's like putting a new paint job on the car, but the engine is still terrible. The interior, you change the seat covers and everything else. All right, you redecorated it, but the engine is still a kaput. It's still backfire. It's still clunked up. You didn't replace the engine. The rebuild, I said it time and time again. The rebuild starts with the ownership. Until the ownership treats this like her baby, not a baby for business, a baby for a winner. Until she do that, how can a fan of the Lions be a fan of the Lions? You're no more than a money chip. And if you're okay with that, well, then it's fine. I'm not here to try to persuade you to otherwise, to think otherwise. I'm saying before they made the trade for Stafford, they was putting themselves in a position to take the next step forward. Why could you have foundational pieces? I'm going to say it again. Trey Flowers, Frank Ragnow, TJ Hawkinson, and I am drawing a blank. It was Kenny Galladay, but they let him walk. And it was another player that I saw potentially could be it. And I'm going to say on a limb, it's going to be Jeff Okudah. Jeff Okudah is going to take the biggest leap, I believe. It's either him or Jelani Tabai. Is going to take a big leap. Why? Because, in fact, I believe the coach knows what he wants out of these players. If not, they won't be here. And the players that they're going to bring in here is going to basically help them out. Now, if you bring in a guy like Danny Shelton, or I mean, forgive me, Jamie Collins, and when they came in with the whole Patriots way, the Patriots, all the players from the Patriots that came here, they are used to a different environment where nine is the stench of championships they smell. Not winning a title, not winning a division title, not going to the title game. Winning championship is the stench they used to smelling. When they came into this facility, even I mean, this is for the time for negotiation or recruitment or bringing in the free agent, or whatever. Before they even sign, you could smell the stench immediately that this is not a winning culture. You could see it has potential based upon the ones who's basically doing the groundwork. That's where Quinn and Patricia came in, and it was basically restructuring the system. But it still had the stench of 9-7. So what the Lions do? You get rid of them. Why? Why do you get rid of them? Because they're not winning. This franchise, the ownership doesn't want to win. So now it's time to save face. Save face is, why did they get hired in the first place? Not because they were winners. It was part of an organization that was winning, but who hired them? So what I'm saying is, you brought in two guys that is considered no experience, but they have the stench of success on them in an environment that's full of 8-8, 9-7 on down. So you're asking them to win with an 8-8 stench of environment. They got to clean all that out. Every player that was comfortable in that system, that's Matt Millen all the way up. Because remember, before Matt Millen, the Lions was actually winning with Barry Sanders. The year that Matt Millen was about to take over, Barry Sanders, I think he retired. I think it was 99, I believe. He retired. Matt Millen takes over, and it's a stench in the air. It's just a losing, content stench. No championship stench. Nothing. Even, matter of fact, that was the time, that was the regime that removed the 91 NFC title game stench, which was the highest of the Lions organization in the Super Bowl era. So Bob Quinn had to get rid of Mark Mayhew, which was, I don't know, he was, I guess you could say he was a disciple or successor or whatever, but, you know, up under Matt Millen. He was up under him. So they was all connected. That stench had to go. And everything that they brought in here had to leave. Everything, it's an environment. It's like a house that smells, for example, right? When you first go in that house, it smells. You're like, oh, God, it's a stench. But if you sit there long enough, you don't even smell the stench anymore because you're acclimated. So that's what happens to a lot of players that's from winning organization or a lot of, you know, whatever. It's a stench here. In the organization, it's a stench. It's a losing content with, no, let's say, a high tolerance for losing, contentment, and a low volume for winning. Stench in the air when you come into this facility. This is why the fans get ecstatic about they bringing in a player. It's news. Why is it news that you're bringing in a player? Because you got the stench. It's a low ceiling. It's mediocrity. Well, so-and-so came in here. Oh, you never. You notice the top tier guys don't come in here? If you talk about this, Kenny Golladay is not a top tier guy. He's the same level of Darius Slay is. When there's nobody else on the market, that's basically a step ahead of you on the market, to say it that way. Well, then you're going to be the highest one in the market. So yeah, you can set the market. You can set the whole tone. But he's B-list. He's not a league changer. He don't carry a franchise. Give me a player on this team that can carry a franchise. Somebody say Stafford did it. No, Stafford did it by default. He's not a franchise quarterback. I mean, how can I say it? He's not a guy that people are paying to come see hand over fist to come. I'm talking about internationally or what? I mean, not locally. You said nationally, not locally. I say internationally, not locally. Local players that come to see him because in fact he's the best that they didn't had. And even with that, I want to say up to now, I think Goff is better than Stafford. His approach is better. When they drafted Stafford, I believe Stafford didn't even know who he was. He started growing. I want to say he started evolving when the ceiling started to change, and that was up under Jim Caldwell. The coach was changing. Stafford started growing. He started progressing. Things started slowing down, and he became more mature. So, but I believe the way Goff is, I think Goff is already more mature than what Stafford was when he was here. Goff is going to be the better version of Stafford, as well as Dan Campbell is going to be the better version of Matt Patricia. Dan Campbell is the next step up. So if Matt Patricia would have had the internship with a team, he would have been a better coach coming here because he would have been knowing what he's getting himself into as a coach. Coming to a Lions organization with nothing to go off of, it's like the worst thing ever. Worst thing ever. So that's what gives Dan Campbell the leg up over Matt Patricia. He has coaching experience, so he knows about himself in a coaching situation. So okay, in a comparison with Matt Patricia, when he coached I don't know, it was the Senior Bowl or whatever team that it was, and they won and all that, but somebody may say, well, he's probably a better college coach. What that means is that it was less pressure on him. The foundation was already set. He don't have to do anything. He didn't have to put a team. He didn't have to put a team together per se. In other words, he didn't have to do work, and that's why I believe where his immaturity was at the most. He didn't do a lot of homework. He was a guy. Matt Patricia was the type of guy he was like good for veterans. The guys that's already seasoned, they already know what they already know what to do. Guys you can count on. He's made for those. College players at that Senior Bowl, they was ready for him because they trying to prove to go to the next level. They already seasoned for what they did in the collegiate ranks, and so they pretty much they can be put in a place to go ahead and go. He was good for that. Dan Campbell got the leg up on him because he was able to be an interim coach for a team that was actually in the cellar. So he was able to see what he can do with a team that was like that. So that's why I would say Dan Campbell is good for this team. For a team that was basically a disaster in Miami, they was in a mental state. The atmosphere was just shot. He got a chance to see what he can do with a disaster situation. In comparison to Patricia, he had no experience, none of it. And I can say the same thing with Caldwell. Caldwell didn't have that coming here either. He was dealing with Peyton Manning. What are you talking about? Peyton Manning himself turned that franchise around. So Caldwell just pretty much put the cherry on top. But he didn't. Every coach that they brought in here, they never experienced an organization like the Lions. They never experienced an atmosphere like the Lions. Every coach. Bobby Ross, even when he came here from the Chargers. They never experienced that, though. Somebody say, well, he brought the Chargers 1 year. 1 year. 1 year to the Super Bowl. 1 year. Before I was like, building it? No. And I could be wrong. Maybe it was part of the process of getting the Natron Means and Anthony Millers and who was I think it was O'Brien was his coach, a quarterback. Was it O'Brien? I can't think of it. Was it Miller? I can't think of his coach. His quarterback was when they played against the 49ers, I believe, in the Super Bowl. That was the year that they beat out Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh should have definitely beat the Chargers. But what I'm saying is he didn't build anything there. They were just they took advantage of the Steelers that year. And of course the next year the Steelers went to the Super Bowl. And where was San Diego at? Nowhere to be found. So I'm saying like that the Lions have never, even with Steve Mariucci wasn't part I think he didn't come from San Francisco, but he came from the West Coast. I think he was up on a Mike Holmgren tree. I think he was a part of that tree at Green Bay. But even with that, he his starting process was with the Lions. But Dan Campbell was probably the only guy as a first year coach to come in with actually being tested, being battle tested. So with that being said, am I satisfied with what they did? No, it's window dressing. It's damage control. The previous owner made a mistake, and I'm not faulting her, whatever. I'm just saying it's a difference of like winning as a priority or being financially sound as a priority. That's where I weighed the difference of this franchise. And I believe for years they wanted to be financially sound versus being a winner as a priority. All right, Lions fans, I salute.